Okay, so we're starting slightly late due to that fire alarm. So first thing we've got is apologies for absence, and I've got Councillor Valland from Leicester, Mr Lovegrove, who's unwell, and Mr Gribley is here instead of Mr Frisbee. No urgent item. Oh, declarations of interest next. None. Good. Urgent items, none. Chairman's announcements, just a brief one on absences. And I think it would be beneficial to you all if I let the Chief just tell you about COVID absences. So over to you, Chief.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, just to update members, really, over the last 2 weeks, we have seen a significant increase in the rise of absences across the organisation. Whilst the figures include all absences, they have been heavily impacted by the COVID self-isolation. I'm happy to say over the last week, those numbers have started to drop down. So about 2 weeks ago, we were just shy of 100 people out of the organisation, which is a significant number. That number's now dropped into the region of 70, 75. And since we've now got some exemptions to the self-isolations through the government guidance. We haven't enacted any of those yet, but it's a useful tool for us. So I think it's just important that members are aware we were being impacted again by absences. We are very much on top of it and monitoring on a daily basis. It does seem like it's peaked and is ebbing away a little bit, but I thought it only right for members to know it did affect service delivery, and at its worst, we did have 2 fire engines not available because of it. But those are now fully available. But I just thought members should be cited on it. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you for that, Chief. And a couple of things I've forgotten. So obviously this is the first meeting where Callum is now properly the full Chief Fire Officer. All other meetings he's been to has been all manner of things. But welcome in your new job, Callum. I'm sure you'll do well. We've also got Lauren, who's just down here. Lauren's the monitoring officer. And remember, this is on YouTube in case you guys want to watch it later. Right. We've done apologies. I've done declarations. I've done urgent items. Done chairman's announcements. Done absences. So we're on to minutes now, I think. So I'll move that the minutes of the meeting held on whenever it is a true and correct record. Can you second, Vice Chairman?
Yes, seconded, Chair.
All in favour? Thank you very much. So the next one's corporate governance. These are on pages 17 to 26. You chaired this, Ken, over to you. Nothing anybody wants to add? All in happy we received them? Thank you very much. First report is revenue and capital outturn 27 to 34. Colin Sharp is here. He's our treasurer. I think everybody knows you, Colin. So over to you.
Okay, thank you very much, Chairman. Yes, this first report for the CFA today is to inform the CFA of the final revenue and capital outturn figures for the financial year ended at the end of March 2020-21. Just to note that the figures will be subject to external audit review, and then the final actual statutory published statements of accounts will be submitted to the CFA for approval. Given the delays to the availability of external audit that were reported recently, I expect the draft statement to come to CFA or CFA or Corporate Governance Committee in September, and then the final draft, then the final statement of accounts to come forward to the CFA in December, following the completion of the audit. But that's all the formal statements, the formal statutory statement that's audited. What's before you today is the management accounts, if you like, the outturn against the revenue and capital budgets. But I would just stress they are subject to anything that any changes that may result from the external audit process. Not that I'm expecting any, but it is only fair that I say that. So in terms of the recommendations, the CFA is asked to note the revenue and capital outturn position as set out in the report, approve carry forwards and underspends which are also set out, and also the transfer of a grant from the government to offset shortfalls in council tax and business rates collection due to COVID into an accounting reserve. So moving through the report, the executive summary just sort of sets out when the revenue and capital budgets were approved. You'll be familiar with all of that. Paragraph 4 states that there was an underspend against the updated revenue budget of £1,336,000 and nearly 3.4 million of slippage on the capital programme. You'll be aware that that revenue underspend is significantly higher than the figure that we have reported during the course of the year. The reason is because of, as you'll have seen from the report, because there were some one-off adjustments at the end of the year, namely a refund on the business no longer required, and one due to a revaluation, one due to refunds following challenge of the business rates revaluations on all the authorities' premises from the 2017 revaluation. And then 650,000 net underspend for actual in-year items, which, as I said, is similar to what we previously reported. The paragraph 7 shows you some more detail under the various headings. I don't propose to go to read all through those. You'll be pleased to know, but obviously picking out employees, other expenditure, the impact of COVID on our costs, in that there were some additional costs due to COVID, which have been offset by a government grant shown as income, but there are also some underspend. So, for example, transport costs underspent, as you might expect, because people have been having remote meetings, not able to visit premises in person, etc. So you'll have been able to see those. Moving down page 29, income again shows that we had some additional unbudgeted income since the last report, including fire link funding and some funding to help us address the administrative costs of the pension remedy following the McLeod judgment, and also costs were awarded following that successful fire safety prosecution, which I think has been discussed previously. Moving on to page 30, little point 10, as I mentioned earlier, the government has provided £1.6 million of funding towards collection fund deficits. This is recognising there's likely to be a shortfall in the collection of high council tax and business rates due to the pandemic, and also the additional business rates reliefs. And because of the way the accounting on the collection fund works, the actual cost of that will appear in the current 21-22 financial year and future years. So although the government gave local authorities and fire authorities the grant towards the end of 2021, and therefore we have to account for it in 2021, we actually need to keep it to meet those to meet the effect on the collection fund in 21-22 onwards. So we're proposing to move that to a specific reserve, which is what all local authorities will be doing. So that accounts for the revenue side of things, Chair. The capital outturn programme is shown from paragraph 8 onwards. You'll see there that we had spending of £1.4 million at the bottom of the table and slippage of £3.3 million. The slippage is partly due to COVID, I guess, to delays in there to organise works and purchases, and delays in the supply chain. Also because some of these purchases are very large, for example, the aerial platform ladder, and take time to decide and place orders. So paragraphs 9 to 12 give the CFA some more detail of the slippage under those under those various headings. And certainly when we come to do the first budget monitoring report for this financial year, which will go to the Corporate Governance Committee in September, I want to take a close look at the capital programme and get a good view at this stage in the new financial year where we are with all of these, and what will be spent this year, and if anything else will slip. As clearly as you'll be aware, there are still some issues in the supply chain, etc., regards the impacts of COVID, and certainly we're experiencing delays on certain things with labour shortages, sort of materials difficulties, etc. Moving on then to reserves. So as noted at paragraph 13, and as I've sort of referred to already, it's proposed that the 1.3 million revenue underspend, that's comprising the in-year underspend and the one-off items, that be transferred to the budget strategy and COVID-19 reserve. And as I mentioned, the government grant for the collection fund be put into a specific reserve. So moving to paragraph 14 and the table towards the bottom of page 31, you'll see that the authority at the end of March assuming these recommendations are agreed, has reserves of nearly £22 million. That does seem a high figure. I think we'd all recognise that. But looking down the table, most of those funds are earmarked for particular purposes, and paragraph 15 onwards gives you some detail of the key ones amongst those. So the only really truly free reserves in there are the general reserve, which is all authorities have to keep a general working rainy day reserve. That's shown at 2.5 million. I think we've added further to that in the current 21-22 budgets. That is actually £3 million as of today, but as at the end of the year last year, as at the end of March, it was the 2,587,000. That's your working day rainy day reserve, which we absolutely need. There's then the budget strategy and COVID-19 reserve, which is again something that we will play into the budget monitoring that we'll be doing shortly, and as we look to preparing budget proposals for next 22-23 financial year. And then the recruitment over establishment reserve, which we keep to enable the chief fire officer to either go slightly over operation establishment or to take other action to address particular staffing or resourcing needs. And I think Callum is developing some thoughts around that, which again we will bring through to corporate governance or CFA. So I say, although it does seem a lot of money, we are, because of the way we've broken it down in the table, we're able to explain why that amount of money is being held in reserves. And again, you'll be familiar with sort of the specific lines in there and the plans behind them, or the reason that we're holding them. So again, the report goes on at the top of page 32, just to give you, as I say, just to pick out some of those more significant reserves and provide some background to those. Moving probably on to the final part, which is Treasury Management. This tends to be a very short section for the CFA because there have been no departures from the Treasury Management policy statement that the CFA has agreed. The CFA's investments, if that's the correct word, the CFA sort of cash that it needs to place on deposit are all held by the City Council. So the CFA doesn't make any investments directly or place money on the money markets or with other local authorities directly. It simply makes use of the City Council's Treasury Management function. So whereas within if you're involved, say within the City Council, County Council, Rutland Council, outturn statements, you may see more detail on Treasury Management, but it is very straightforward for the Combined Fire Authority. And the rest of the report just gives you the formal implications under the various categories and the background papers, which was the budget setting and the budget monitoring during the course of the year. I think that concludes my overview. I'm happy to take any questions, Chair, and I'm sure Callum similarly will take questions that he's better able to answer.
Thank you, Colin. Before I go any further, can I just ask members to note that we've got Rupert Matthews, who's the new Police and Crime Commissioner, online observing. So welcome, Rupert. And in the spirit of collaboration, if you've ever got any questions, you can either send them in to the Chief, or if you want to ask questions at the meeting, just let me know and I'll let you speak, Rupert. Anything you want to add, Chief, to the report from Colin before I say a few words?
Just very briefly, Chair, I think Colin surmised it really well, that the reserve level does appear high. It's a task that I'm more than happy to undertake, and that over this year is to try and spend some of that to release or get the capital programmes delivered. Colin's quite right. We've got a number of building works we would love to have done this last year, but with COVID, we haven't been able to get contractors on site. I think it's also important to note the underspend again in the on-call budget this year. That's been a year-on-year theme. We've already got our intentions on how we can potentially use that money as we come away from the day crew plus duty system. So whilst it reports as an underspend this year and probably next year, that will be used to offset any financial increases from the DCP system. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chief. Well, it's obviously Colin has been a difficult year to deal with, and we have got significant underspends. We've also got a good level of reserves and a decent amount in the COVID reserve, but I'm happy to say that, as you've pointed out, Colin, that most of the reserves are earmarked for future expenditure, so we can justify them. And one other bit of good news in there, although it's only small beer, it's nice to see we managed to sign EMAS up at Colville. It's the sort of thing we're wanting to achieve to get the ambulance people with the fire people. Right, I'll take some questions before I move anything. So who have we got? Betty, I think.
I think to some extent you may well have answered my question. It was really around about whether or not we're going to produce a plan, say how we can spend or deal with our underspends. It really is a great opportunity for us to look wider at what we do and how we can, it's really how we can actually spend out there so the public can see what we're doing. I think that public persona of what we do is very important, and that if we to be seen out there is something that I know my residents in particular like to see. So maybe if we could spend some of that and increasing our public profile. Thank you, Chair.
Do you want to answer, Callum?
Thank you, Chairman. I think the important thing to recognise with reserves is it's one-off spending and it's one-off money. So once it's gone, it's gone. If we employ more staff with the reserves, once the reserves are gone, we are still left with the cost of the staff. So it's about spending the reserves the best way we possibly can to get the most return for the community and indeed the authority. I think it's fair to say the over-establishment budget, the 400,000 that's identified that Colin spoke about, is an area we could potentially use a little bit better. Certainly, as we've gone through the pandemic, our support side of the organisation is very, very lean, very close to the bone, if not on the bone. And there's some possibility we can use that to alleviate some of that pressure. But I have to say there that it's only a fixed term contract we'd be able to award for that, because once the reserve money is gone, it's not there anymore. It's not a year-on-year budget. So Colin and I actually had quite a long meeting yesterday around we need to get smarter with how we're spending our money and how we're hopefully going to identify no underspend in the future so that we're actually getting the best out of our money on a year-on-year basis. Really easy sentence to say, not so quite easy to do over a year with a global pandemic, but the comment is fair, and I think that's where we've got our work to do, is to make sure we use the money in year rather than underspend and then decide what we're doing with the underspend. Thank you, Chair.
Yes, we've also got our general reserve up now to the 3 million, which was recommended, which is good. I'll take Bill first, then you, Neil.
Thanks, Chair. Yes, mine just for the record, mine is page 30, item 10, property. We talked some time ago, over a year ago now, regarding the canteen, and we said no work could take place on there until a business plan had come forward and a new tenant was obtained. There's £250,000 in the budget to refurbish that and turn it into office space. Just confirming that that won't happen until we've got a business plan in place.
Yes, Callum, what's happened to that canteen?
The honest answer at the moment, nothing's happened with it yet. Whilst we have considered the ability to, are we able to rent it out? EMAS have now confirmed that they wouldn't be interested in expanding their footprint. Whilst there is some discussions going on with local councils at the moment around whether they would like to use our property portfolio for anything, I think realistically that's more a drop-in base or a hot desk, which I don't think is going to change the world in any way, shape or form. As part of the learning and development build, or the project looking at learning and development, we were looking at potentially using our own assets or our own estate a little bit better. I think there have been some plans drawn up at the moment of what we could do with that space, to whether make it classrooms, virtual reality suites. We're at the plan stage at the moment, but as it stands at the moment, we haven't spent any money on that area, and we're still mulling over what we would or wouldn't do with it. Or do we leave it with the status quo and put the money back into the property budget elsewhere?
That sounds to you, Bill. Nothing's been done, disappointingly, but are you okay with that, Bill? Thank you. Neil.
Thanks, Chairman. Question for Colin, and this is focusing on the revenue underspend.
Got a name then, and Anna will just circulate it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
I know the speaker, so I'll formally move the recommendations at A, B, C, and D. And would the Deputy Chair like to second them?
Yes, seconded, Chair.
All in favour, please show. Thank you very much. Moving on to 9, our plan 20 to 24, 2021 refresh, annual report and statement of assurances. This is on page 35 to 98. Callum's going to present. Callum.
Thank you, Chairman. So as the title suggests, there's kind of two main areas to this report. The first is the our plan refresh, and the second is the annual report and statement of assurance. So I'll kind of take them in two chunks if I can. So starting with our plan 2020 to 24 and the annual refresh, that's contained in Appendix A of your pack, which is pages 39 to 82. As a brief background, the Fire and Rescue Services Framework for England requires every fire and rescue service to produce an Integrated Risk Management Plan, or IRMP, and the IRMP must cover a period of at least 3 years and be subject to public consultation. The service, very well supported by members, completed this activity in 2019 and published a report in 2020. And this is basically the annual refresh of that plan, just to bring it up to date, to make sure everything's accurately reported as best as possible. And in particular, we've had a number of new managers enter the service who lead on those strategies. So the strategies have been refreshed to reflect that. I think it's also a great opportunity for us to refresh the document to bring in any national guidance or best practice. So, for example, our plan now has a inclusion of the core code of ethics, which is on page 50 of the bundle. This is a new addition to the fire service, which has been set by the LGA with a very heavy steer by the Fire Minister. And there's a clear expectations that services will adopt it, making it very relevant for us to include it in our plan. I must stress that this is just an update and a refresh. It's not a new IRMP. None of the performance measures have been altered or changed or removed. Pages 78 through to 80 provide a clear list of our aims and objectives of the plan. But it's just a bit of a refresh, and that's the bit I must stress. None of the key performance indicators have changed, and nor is this one required to go out to full public consultation, but obviously we'll publish it on the website. Chairman, would you like me to continue with the statement of assurance, or do you want me to pause for questions at that point?
Continue, Callum.
Thank you. The second part of this report, which is contained on pages 83 and 98, is the annual report and statement of assurance. Again, this is a requirement against the National Fire and Rescue Services Framework, and it summarises our performance over the year. Members of the Corporate Governance Committee, we're very familiar with the performance that we've been reporting, although it looks very different and a lot more graphical on this this piece of paper than we report to CGC. I'm especially proud of this document, and I'm really proud of it, not because it's my first as chief, but because of the achievements of the service over the year. We've worked incredibly hard to continually improve what we're doing for the community, and I really believe this document shows it. I also don't want to forget we've also been dealing with a global and a national pandemic during that time, so I've conducted an awful lot of activities outside of our day-to-day business, but I really believe it shows a change in our performance culture and our productivity culture, which will really stand us in excellent stead when we come round to measuring ourselves regionally and nationally against the inspectorate. So I'm absolutely chuffed to pieces with this report. It's really encouraging. It shows that really good level of performance, and I thank each and every one of the organisation for that. That's not just me achieving it through myself or through my strategic team. That's everyone in the organisation. And I'll summarise by basically saying, of course, we will continue to improve, but I'm really happy with how far we've come in such a short period of time. And I'll probably leave it there, Chair, and happy to take any questions.
Very good indeed, Chief. Betty?
Thank you. I think I'd like to commend you on the report, because there's been, given the period that we're in COVID, you've actually gone the extra mile to actually work with people out there. And I think the work over the past year really has been very positive. Can I also say what I found too is, in terms of the equality, diversity and inclusion, the recruitment plan is excellent. I mean, there's been a lot of work on in that particular area, and I have been, as you know, quite hands-on with it with the officers. But I just wanted to commend you and the officers for the work that you have done over the past year. Thank you, Chair.
I'll take you first, Neil. I'll come back to you last, Callum. Neil?
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, I'd like to echo the comments just made by Betty. It's a very good plan, and I certainly welcome the inclusion now of the Code of Ethics that you highlighted, which is page 50 in the group. And again, good and excellent work on equality and diversity that's going on. If I had any comment really in that sphere, it'd be nice just to see a little bit of reflection of that in the photographs that's being used in the documents. And I know that we briefly just touched on this at the Corporate Governance Committee meeting, and I know that you've got some ideas about that, as I would naturally expect, but perhaps on the next refresh we might be able to see a little bit more diversity in the photographs. Thank you, Chairman.
Do those first, and we'll come to you, Councillor Abatia, isn't it? Yeah, Fonseca, sorry, I get you mixed up. Just let him answer the one question there first.
I think that's fair comment, Councillor, and I take your points on board. We are trying to change the corporate photos that we've got. Not been easy through COVID, but it's a fair comment. And just to support Councillor Newton's statements as well, at the next authority meeting in September, we'll be bringing our full equalities update, and I think that will really reflect the work that we've done to try and improve the diversity, with some success, but as I've said previously, more work to do in that area.
You also tell me you're going to get some new stock photos done, so we're not relying on old stock photos, which will be more reflective of the people we recruit. Is that true, isn't it, Callum?
Absolutely. We're just trying to get the photographer into the organisation, which hasn't been possible through COVID. But thank you.
Okay, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. At the outset, let me really appreciate this fantastic work which you have put in regarding the plan. And it's very clear, very comprehensive, and yeah, anybody reading through it can get a feel of what is happening and what is not happening. So that's fantastic. One thing I would like to, in fact, share with you is regarding your profile in the social media. I go through it and I find it is there all the time. But then I have some observation in this case, in fact, and we equate fire services with fire. But apart from that, you are much involved in many other things as well. So now take, for example, rescuing people trapped in water, and then again, buildings collapsing, hazardous material. People don't tend to get that. They equate that more with the police rather than the fires, if I'm correct. So I think a little bit of you need to stress more upon those aspects of the work of the service which you are involved in. So social media should be filled with that as well. It's not only about fire. Of course, fire is always there. It's going to happen all the time, and we are the safety, the precaution, everything is taken into consideration. We'll have less fire, but we may have more of these issues now. So that is my consideration. So if you can work on that. The second issue is regarding the staff. Now, so you have 700 staff employed with you. Does it include the on-call staff as well? The third question is regarding the inspection, HMI CFRS inspection. I've been through all the criteria. Effectiveness is one of the criteria. Efficiency is another criteria, and people is another criteria. Whereas you have done pretty well in effectiveness and efficiency. You have requires improvement and you have satisfactory, good in a way. But when people section I see, everything requires improvement. So what are you going to how are you going to address that, and when can we see that being addressed, and when is the next inspection? Thank you, Chair.
Sorry, Callum, go ahead.
Thanks. I'll start with the social media one. Social media profile is interesting. I have my own views on it as well around it. It's a very formal channel at the moment, and I'm not sure that best engages with the social media market. I wonder if we need to change our stance a little bit to be a little bit less corporate and a little bit more personal. But I take your point around promoting all the activities we do that across the far and wide range. The social media base has increased over the years, so we are still reaching quite a few people and improving that reach. But yeah, I think social media is one where we need to continue to evolve. And I think ironically, it's almost the platforms are evolving on a daily basis, and what was a successful social media platform last year now longer doesn't exist, and we need to move to TikTok, for example, or something else, a new platform, and we've got to try and keep pace with the audience that I'm not attuned to as much as I used to be, shall we say. But I think that's a fair point. Coming on to the inspectorate, you raised some really, really pertinent questions there, Councillor. The inspection occurred in late 2018, and we got the results in 2019. And I think it's fair to say we were disappointed with the results. It was quite a painful punch on the nose. I don't disagree with the comments of the inspectorate. I need to be clear with that. I think there was some really important lessons we needed to learn. And I would argue we are learning them on a daily basis. So if we talk only about the people strand for the time being, what have we done and when can we expect to see a change? Since that report landed, we've changed an awful lot of the way we do. Some of those are soft metrics that are really hard to measure. So, for example, building trust in the strategic team. We can't just do one thing to build trust. What we have to do is about 8 or 9 different things and consistently do that over a prolonged period of time. The way we engage with the workforce, the way we engage them with decision making, the way we develop them, which is a key question actually of what are we doing differently to develop our staff. We've talked and been through Fire Authority identifying the need for increased numbers of recruitments. It's not about just getting people into the fire service and getting them up to speed operationally. It's developing them and getting them ready for leadership roles and progression through the organisation. And we're doing an awful lot with that. So Georgina Coop is now brought in as part of the area manager for personal and organisational development, or people and organisational development, sorry, where we have leadership development tools now coming online. We've now employed a organisational development officer to help coach and mentor our staff, getting them ready for leadership roles. It's quite a broad subject. I think it's fair to say changing culture and changing people takes a longer period of time. I would expect to see much better improved results in our next inspectorate, which is the best I can give you is spring 2022, because that's the only dates I've got. But it's very much, it's only around the corner now and we'd expect to see it. And I think just to balance some of those comments as well, the whole fire and rescue sector required improvement in people. There are very few that were doing well in the people strand. So I'm not trying to say we're as good as everyone else or as bad as everyone else. I think it's just fair to comment that the people strand was the weaker strand of all 3 for fire and rescue services. But as I've discussed with the chairman, I would be very confident to see a significant improvement across the board with the inspectorate, especially in the people strand. And there are all sorts of reasons of why that may have been as poor as it was. I think in fairness, whilst I wasn't here for that period of time, through austerity, we had to save an awful lot of money, an awful lot in an awful short space of time, and some of those people elements may have been the ones that were cut, and we're just trying to put a bit of meat back onto that bone as we speak. So hopefully that answers your questions, Councillor.
New chief, new results is what we're going to aim for. Right, so we've got some recommendations. These are on page 35 at 2, and I thought we might add and thank everyone for their good work, diligence and dedication to reflect the work that has been done. So Vice Chairman, are you okay if we add that? I mean, the motion's fine, but if we just thank everyone for their good work, diligence and dedication, would you be okay with that?
I think it's perfect, Chair. Yeah.
Okay, can we have a show of hands in favour with the recommendation with that extra? Thank you very much. Pass that on back to them, Chief. Obviously, you're here to hear it, but a lot of people aren't. So we're now going to agenda item 10, service delivery update. This is on 99 to 104. And again, it's you, Callum.
Thank you, Chairman. Again, this paper continues with the positive theme and the continued improvements in performance and productivity. In particular, I'd like to draw members' attentions to paragraph 5 and 6, which shows the improvements in home fire safety checks out in our community, and also paragraph 7, which reflects significant improvements in and around the number of fire protection audits we're undertaking within the community. Again, as I've kind of already said, this is due to a much more mature performance culture and leadership approaches within the service, and I do believe we will be a lot better positioned against the national picture. I would like to stress there is an error in paragraph 13 that I do need to clarify. That's on page 100 of the bundle, and it's regarding the fire deaths. This should read that for the entire financial year of 2020 to 2021, there were 6 fire deaths in the area, not within the first quarter. So I wouldn't like to be misleading at all in anywhere. And to date, in 21 to 22, we've had 1 fire death. So just to kind of clear that up. And then finally, I'd just like to draw members' attention to paragraph 16 through 19. And this relates to our commitment under the Integrated Risk Management Plan and our commitment to using resources flexibly to maximise the availability across the Leicester, Leicestershire and Rutland service area. So the moves described around changing some of the fire engines, their layout, have yielded the following results in June.
If he does move anything, which could be noticeable. I mean, Stuart must be pleased from Inkley. He's got 83% improvement. But any questions for the chief? Yes, very good.
Thank you, Callum. Can I just ask what the difference is between a tactical response vehicle and a standard fire appliance, please?
He's a new boy, you see, Callum, so you're going to have to start him off.
Yes, of course. So a normal fire engine, as we call them, is your traditional fire engine. It has a crew of 4. It's your Swiss Army knife of, it's got a little bit of everything. And generally speaking, it goes to fires, road traffic collisions and deals with them excellently. Tactical response vehicle is a different type of vehicle. So it is a smaller vehicle. It can be crewed with 4, 3 or 2 firefighters. And it's a smaller version. It still has quite good capabilities when it comes to firefighting. And dependent on the crew available, it can almost offer exactly the same as a standard fire engine. But as the crewing numbers shrink, whereas the traditional fire engines wouldn't be available to go to instance with that, the tactical response vehicles are. So it's really maximising those people who are available, enabling them to go to instance and tackle it in a safe way, albeit a slightly lesser capable way than a standard fire engine. Thank you.
Yeah, if you come to the fire authority, say if you're subbing again in December, we're going to do it at Callum's place, and we're going to have a new piece of equipment he's got there, and we'll perhaps have a tactical response vehicle, because they have been updated since we saw them the last time for members to look at. So even if you're not a member, if you want to come along and have a look at one, everybody loves a fireman. Okay, I've got Bill first, then you, Joe. Bill.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, my question is about home safety checks. Whilst I fully approve of what you're doing, there's a conflict there between what you're doing and what light bulb's doing. You can correspond with light bulb, but do a similar thing. And the real question is, do you notify the landlord, or it might be, that you've actually done the fire alarm? Because once you've fitted it, responsibility becomes the landlord, not the tenant. So if you're not telling the landlord, he won't know you fitted it. If it was to go wrong or tenant was to change, how's the crossover taking place? There's just a gap there that I'm a bit concerned about. And of course, if it's a council property, that's another ball game. So can you enlighten me on that one, please?
Yeah, again, some really valid questions. And I think the important factor and the overarching one for us is around community safety. And if there is a need for someone to have a smoke alarm and they are unable to do it themselves, I think it's the right thing for us to do to fit that to hopefully prevent a fire death and hopefully prevent any injury in the event of an incident. Landlord's responsibility is a very, very good question. One where I think the landlord borns the responsibility to make sure their accommodation is safe and fit for purpose for people to reside in. And that would generally put the burden on them to install, whether it be carbon monoxide or indeed smoke alarms. And I think the issue we come with is what's the right thing to do if someone is in a place and scores high enough that we think they need a home fire safety check or a smoke alarm. I still think it's the right thing for us to do to fit that. How we feed that back to the landlords will be interesting, bearing in mind there are obviously local authorities, various different owners, various different agencies, and indeed independent landlords. I think it's a fair question. I think the honest answer is it should be on the landlord's responsibility, but we are seeing over the space of decades and years that not all landlords are as good as we would want them to be. And I think I have to look myself in the mirror in the morning and say, I would rather fit a smoke alarm where we're not necessarily required to, knowing that someone hopefully will get out of a fire fit and well. I'm not sure if that answers your question, Councillor, but it's the honest answer from the fire services perspective.
Yes, partly. It's just that I think what you fit is called a fire angel, and they have a 10-year battery life. But I know there's been some problems with some batches, shall I say. But it just concerns me who's legally responsible at the end of the day, because Fire alarms, very desirable. Landlord safety checks, I think electrics every 2 years, gas is every year. But, unless it's included in the inspection, they wouldn't know. So if you don't tell them, how are they going to know? And you can't rely on the tenant to tell people either, because that's another problem.
The ones I've got make some dreadful beeping when the batteries are going. It drives the tenants bonkers. What's the answer? Your answer, Callum?
Yeah, so Fire Angel is a specific brand of manufacturer for smoke alarm, and nationally Fire Angel was the one provided to us by the Home Office, and the council's right, there was some issues with a number of batches of Fire Angel. That has subsequently been rectified, and alarms have been replaced with a newer one. They come with a 10-year inbuilt lithium-ion battery, so that people can't remove them to power the remote control of the TV or remote control vehicles, etc. I'd have to consult with my fire protection team around the specific legal stance of the burden on landlord. If they're inspecting their properties as regularly as they should do, there would be a burden on them as the homeowner and the landlord to provide the reasonable assurances rather than the fire and rescue service. But I could ask a fire protection officer to follow that up to give a more rounded answer if that's desirable.
Okay, send that to Bill then. I've got you now, Joe.
Thanks, Nick. Page 101, paragraph 16. You talk about life-threatening incidents, getting to them with an average of 10 minutes, which is very commendable. But obviously, Leicestershire and Rutland is a very large rural area. Do you have any specific information or intelligence on how quick you can get to some of the more remote areas? I'm thinking of places like Hose Harby in the Vale, etc., literally in the middle of nowhere compared to, say, where Melton is.
Again, very fair question. Thank you. In the Corporate Governance Committee, we provide the regular performance update of the overall attendance time for the service area, but also the breakdown into the district areas as well. If you have specific areas in mind, we can provide all of that around how quickly we can get there on an average to life expectancy, life critical instance. I think the real realism is there are some areas of the county that we can't necessarily get to in that speed because of the rurality of it and because of the number of fire stations we have available to us. So there is a difference depending where you live in the county. However, what I am really proud of is that 10-minute attendance time also includes the call handling time and the time it takes to mobilise the fire engines. So I think there is a good level of service across all of our service area. But obviously, if you live around the corner or if you live in the city where there are fire stations, you are likely to get a fire engine slightly quicker.
Nick, it'd be useful if we could have that intelligence. That'd be great.
Yeah, obviously, Callum, you don't know Joe's new member, but he's also the leader of Melt, which is the most I mean, we've got Ken here, who's Rutland, that's pretty rural, but where Joe himself is, it's probably even more rural. So if you can send it in. Thank you. Okay, so we've no other questions, and we have some recommendations, which are A, B, and C on page 99. If I move them, will you second them, Vice Chairman?
Yes, of course, Chair.
All in favour? Thank you very much. As mentioned earlier, we don't have any urgent items. The next meeting is 22nd of September, and we're going to do it here again, just in case we've got some fresh COVID restrictions about how close we can be to each other. And to remind everyone, the group briefings and group meetings will also be real and will also be here, because even Callum got confused this time. And Anna will sort out rooms for everyone. And then it's my intention, just to let you know, subject to speaking with the Vice Chairman, to have the December meeting when we're discussing the Day Crew Plus stuff, which Callum won't present because he'll be in New York, but the guy who's done all the work, Paul Weston, will present it. I thought we'd better do that if we can back at fire headquarters so we can be seen there. And I wanted to do it kind of early if you'll accommodate me. So I was thinking on Friday, the 3rd of December, 10 a.m. at Callum's place with the group meetings and pre-meetings, 9:30, whatever any particular group wants. So would you be happy with that, Vice Chairman?
I'd be very happy with that, especially if it includes Christmas cake.
Callum won't be here, but he'll provide mince pies, perhaps, Callum?
Yeah.
I'll have to check with Colin to see if we can use
So you
use the
could-
reserve strategy for that. But yeah, we'll
That was a
consider
very
that. Yeah,
good
of course.
answer, Callum.
Okay, and with that, that concludes our meeting. Thank you for your attendance.
Okay.